Good morning and thank you for joining Smart 24 TV this early morning. My name is Jerome Paul Sonko. I'm in here now after that particular drive by Barigi Andrew early this morning. We are on DSTV channel 372 and GoTV channel 394. Many thanks for being part of your daily Kickstarter. Smart means business. Now we're off to our topic of discussion. Pretty much we are going to be looking at commercial laws. We are going to be discussing not only that, but also looking at Uganda's current inflation, but then also looking at what are the possible causes of this one, and then what does Parliament consider before setting out these particular bills that will be tabled. Now this week, the Parliament is the Prime Minister, Robin Anabanja, will be tabling 5 bills and for their first reading. Now these bills, amongst which is the Partnership Amendment Bill 2022, then there is the Trustee Incorporation Amendment Bill 2022, then the Cooperative Societies Amendment Bill 2022. I believe in our discussions of cooperatives a few weeks back, the members of different cooperatives were seeking for this one, saying that this will at least enable cooperatives to get back bigger in Uganda. Then also, and among the other bills that will be tabled by the Right Honourable Prime Minister Robin Anabanja this very week will be the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Bill 2022 and then the Anti-Money Laundering Bill 2022. And of course, money laundering has also been another big issue and a big topic of concern here on the show, and we've been digesting it in one way or the other. Now, joining me to discuss more about this one, I do have an attorney at law, Pentagon Chambers. This is Counsel Louis Chizito. Many thanks for joining us again. Good morning.
Thank you for welcoming me. It's nice to be here.
Okay, and I think we're going to definitely kickstart it from the issue of the commercial, the issue of the commercial laws. Is there a problem with our commercial laws? Because one would ask, why is government tabling only 5 of those?
That's a very legitimate question to ask. Yes, I actually think there is a problem with the commercial laws. Any practitioner will actually tell you that I think Uganda has, as compared to our neighbors, Kenya,
okay,
Tanzania, even Rwanda, there's a problem with our commercial laws generally.
Okay.
They have very many contradictions. They have, some of them are overdue. Now, like the ones that are being presented, especially if you look at the Trustees Incorporation Act,
okay,
we're still dealing with a largely colonial law that is incorporating trusts. Because you know, a trust is a form of, incorporating a trust is in form of a, if you look at our old schools, the Chisobis, the Budos, they were actually incorporated under that law. And it's a 1939 law,
okay,
the one they're seeking to amend. But the biggest problem I have with commercial laws is that I don't know why they are drafted the way they are.
okay,
They are lacking, and they even give practitioners time. If you look at the Financial Institutions Act,
okay,
the problem is that it's not one of those bills that has been tabled for amendment. It has quite a number of contradictions, and the banking business has moved on from that position that are in the law. The last amendment they made in the Financial Institutions Act was, I think, in 2016.
okay.
And of course, I'm not going to go into the Capital Markets Authority Act. I've talked about it a lot whenever I come here. So I think we need to exercise and give professionals a reasonable input when we're actually discussing these commercial laws, because they have a lot of problems.
Okay.
They're even technical in nature. Most of those commercial laws now, if you look at the banking law, they're very technical.
Okay, speaking of this, why is, someone would still ask, why does government only table 5 of those? If you can as well break for us the main commercial laws that you believe should be as well prioritized before they table these 5 this week.
The ones they tabled, actually, indeed, most of them are long overdue.
Okay.
Why are they tabling 5? I really don't know. Because if you look at the commercial laws, I don't even want to break them down, because there are quite many. But you have the Bank of Uganda Act.
Okay.
You have the Financial Institutions Act. You have the Capital Markets Authority Act. You have the Collective Investment Scheme Act. You have the Securities Central Depository Law. They're actually number. But if you look, the Bank of Uganda Act, and I think Bank of Uganda made this case before. I think before Parliament last year, the Deputy Governor was telling the public and parliamentarians to prioritize financial sector laws.
Okay.
But his reasoning was most of these laws have indeed problems, and they should be looked into as early as possible. And he was right.
Okay. Now, for example, let's have a look at this one, the issue of the Trustee Incorporation Amendment Bill 2022. What does it intend to at least address? Because we do feel if these are put into law, there are certain things that they're going to address, and the public will definitely be very happy about this if at all it meets the needs of those in, for example, the corporate affairs and all those issues. But what does, for example, this Trustee Incorporation Amendment Bill intend to meet?
Well, at this point, we shall just be speculating, but I'll give you a few pointers maybe that I feel they could introduce when the amendment is due to be presented. I think maybe later this week.
Okay.
That Trustees Incorporation Act, like I told you, if you look at the old churches, most of them are registered as trustees. Actually, if you go to, I think the only born-again church I've seen that is registered as a trustee, there could be others, but most are registered as companies. You have Kayanjas, I think legally it's registered as the registered trustees of Rubaga Cathedral, not the Catholic one, the one of Kayanja.
The Miracle Center Cathedral.
Yes, so legally it's registered as the registered trustees. So how do you just say trust?
Okay.
There has to be an element of land. So actually those trusts are registered at the Ministry of Lands.
So that means you register the land where you're for example.
The stakeholders in that land, basically. There has to be an element of land.
Okay.
If you're going to register trust. Even foundations, like if you look at the MTN Foundation, if you look at most of these, the Sudil Repair Foundation. For instance, you can put up a building and then you don't register it as Sudil in your name, as maybe the millionaire. Okay. Register it as the registered trustees of MTN. So that every stakeholder there is I know a trust has three players. You have someone who creates it, who you could call a settler. Then you have the beneficiaries. Then you have the trustee as a person, the person who is going to manage that stuff on behalf of all players. So, but that arrangement is actually registered at the Ministry of Lands. Now, the reason why I feel they might amend the Trustees Incorporation Act is recently I had a trust who were trying to dissolve. But under the Trustees Incorporation Act, the deregistering and winding up of a petition of a trust, that arrangement is not clear. So you are at the mercy of the technocrats in Ministry of Lands. So there are gaps in that law, and I have actually felt that anyone who's creating a trust, the governance framework, like I told you, it's a 1939 law.
That we're seeking to amend.
That we're seeking to amend, if you look at the Trustees Incorporation Act. So, indeed, this amendment was long overdue. I've given you an example of winding up. There's no procedure, it's not clear. Even when you look at the regulations that they made under that law, because at least the minister can make regulations if the law is already there. Okay. The regulations also don't cater for that. And trusts have moved on. You have trust funds. Most of them are registered as partnerships, but again, we shall go into that. But again, most trust funds, you find that they register them with Ministry of Land. Someone, for instance, has a plot of land and it's like, okay, we all pray from this plot of land, I can't own it alone. Now, those are the honest actors. They will honestly tell people that, you know what, let's draft a constitution. We are all trustees, and I will be all this land will be held in trust of the pastor or of the church. But like most of our churches, and that's an argument for another day, are registered as companies.
Okay. There's also one that has actually caught my attention, the Anti-Money Laundering Amendment Bill 2022. This one, for the past few weeks, we've been discussing with some of the people in the anti-money laundering schemes in Uganda, those under the Federation as well. But most of them are saying this is a very huge concern for Ugandans because, surprisingly, last year we were almost being recognized as part of, we're almost hitting the blacklist for countries with huge sums of money launderers in there. So when you look at this bill, if at all it is passed into law, what do you believe will also, what do you believe it will address at the end of it all?
If you look at that law, the Anti-Money Laundering Act, you see, the reason even why we have that law, it came in 2013, it's a 2013 law, is because the Financial Action Task Force, it's a G7 kind of working group that monitors money laundering, put government on pressure to have that law. If we did not have it, then our banking system would be alienated from the global financial system and would be forced to use Kenyan banks or Kenyan financial system.
Okay.
The problem with that law, I think, even as is, has been implemented in a half-hearted manner.
Okay.
Give you an example. When you look at the list of accountable persons, how many churches have registered with Financial Intelligence Authority as accountable persons for purposes of money laundering? Of course, all the banks, law firms are even supposed to have a money laundering officer.
Every law firm?
Yeah, but of course that's an unusual, an unnecessary cost, but I know very few law firms that have a money laundering officer.
Okay.
That law has been implemented. You see, the biggest money laundering in Uganda is in real estate.
Okay.
So any amendment should be catering for how to register real estate agents' transactions. Because if I steal money from government, you know, money laundering, the basis of money laundering is cleaning up money from illegitimate sources.
And then you put it somewhere.
You put it in a clean venture, and then you make everyone believe that you actually
you've made this money.
Yeah, in a clean way.
Okay.
Our problem is, in fact, most people are not even plugged into the mainstream financial system.
Okay.
So if you're going to amend such a law, and you want to get off the grey list, because right now Uganda is on the grey list, and I think even the reason why we're amending this law is to prove to the donors, you know, most of those G7 countries, the donor countries here, that there are reasonable steps being taken to deal with money laundering. But the last time I checked and I read the Financial Action Task Force reports, their concern was not on the law. Their concern was on the implementation of the law. Like I told you, churches, and I'm sorry to say this, churches do a lot of money laundering. Every illegitimate source of money
There's
is
a lot of
channeled
money
through
in
churches.
churches, by the way.
Yes.
There's
So
a lot. Even the church leaders have got a lot of money.
exactly. But how many churches file returns with financial intelligence? And yet in the law they are accountable persons. You have banks, you have churches, you have law firms, you have audit firms. Audit firms, I'm sure they abide by it. Law firms, not so much. So the problem with that law is, I don't think that law has a problem. But I'm waiting to see
how it is going to be implemented.
What amendments they're going to bring to the floor,
Okay.
to the floor, and we see, and we have the discussion.
All right. And if you're just joining us, our first bit of our discussion is going to be looking at these bills, the commercial bills, before we will be returning after the break to discuss more about the global inflation crisis in the world. It is something that has actually caused a very huge concern. Surprisingly, when you look at these countries like the United States, where fuel prices have started to decrease, then some people are actually saying, how come in Africa things are not yet changing whatsoever? But that is going to be our discussion after the break. As we are summing up with the first bit of our discussion today on the issue of the commercial bills. And Council, I would as well want to understand, if a viewer out there would as well want to know, on the breakdown of maybe 10 to 15, how many commercial laws do we have in the country?
I can't get a number of head, but there are many.
There are quite many.
But the major one I will look at,
Yes.
the regulation, the banking sector,
Okay.
Bank of Uganda Act. It was last amended, I think, in 2000. But you see, and this is the point I have to make to the financial sector regulators,
Okay.
especially Bank of Uganda. There is no point in amending the laws that regulate that sector when the mother law, the Bank of Uganda Act, is the way it is. For instance, I've recommended very many times.
Okay.
After the financial crisis of 2008, very many regulators world over, central banks, now adopted something called the Twin Peaks model of financial regulation. Okay? There's no reason why the same people who sit to determine monetary policy are the same people who sit to resolve banks. And that is why you see resolution of banks, what you call insolvency, financial sector insolvency, has taken years.
Without happening here.
Don't you see, there's a TFA bank, if you read the monitor last year, that's when they concluded winding up that bank. You see, the central bank of any country has very many functions. One, you regulate the financial sector, now you have the payments, now you have the deposit protection fund, there is need to create a prudential authority within that bank that does financial sector regulations. It has financial sector regulation. Then monetary policy, tinkering with interest rates and macroeconomic stability can be left to the core P team, the central bank.
Okay.
But if you leave the Bank of Uganda, in fact, the governance model within the central bank, and I think there was an MP called Mawanda wanted to introduce an amendment to the Constitution and then subsequently to the Bank of Uganda Act. But amending the governance model of the central bank was not. Okay, yes, they touched on the periphery issues, but the grand scheme of things is that they should look at adopting a Twin Peaks model of financial regulations, where you detach the monetary policy setting from regulating of the financial sector.
Okay.
So the same people who sit to resolve banks and regulating and determining which bank is supposed to be done away with, and the same people who sit to determine monetary policy. Yes, I know there are departments within the Bank of Uganda, but those departments, their powers are not as immense as they would have been if they had been turned into, like, for instance, a prudential authority of sorts. South Africa has that model, I think even Nigeria. All banks after the financial crisis of 2008 found it fit to actually move away from the model we have in the Act.
Let me get you back again. You said the last time the Bank of Uganda Act was amended was in 2000, early 2000. Now that depicts like over
2000 actually, exactly 2000.
2000. So that means it's after two decades. But one would wish to know why does it take too long for that, or is it a Ugandan setting that this happens?
You know, most of these financial sector laws, actually in 2010 is when we had the highest volume of amendments of financial sector, business, commercial laws. Because in 2010, that's when we had the Partnerships Act amended. It was still a colonial law. Okay. That is when you had the Insolvency Law, the Contracts Act. Many laws. I think the Law Reform Commission put in some effort. Why does it take so long? You see, like I've told you, it's a very technical undertaking for you to amend those laws. For instance, if you look at the language and jargon used in the financial sector laws, it's immense. And you know, even our legislative making process is a long one. You have a first reading, second reading, third reading, and then fast tracking those bills, unless maybe there is donor intervention, doesn't happen as fast.
Yeah.
And more so, they are very technical laws. That's why I'll be very interested in the language that they're going to amend in the Anti-Money Laundering Law and the Partnerships Act.
Okay. And for the viewers out there, discussion here entirely was looking at the commercial laws. This week, the Right Honourable Prime Minister will be tabling 5 laws in Parliament, and amongst which will be 4 of those are commercial laws. Then there is one that is the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Bill that will be also tabled this very week by the Prime Minister. And our discussion on the commercial laws in the country comes to an end. After the break, meanwhile, we will be discussing the issue of the global inflation crisis, still with Counsel Louis Tizito. Stick around with more of the conversations. We are as well streaming on YouTube on Smart 24 TV Live. You can hit the subscription button after that particular view. Good morning.